Hello and welcome to our special on budget expectations. I'm Natasha Jhabhaskar. Expectations are high as Union Finance Minister Arun Jaitley prepares to present his last full budget ahead of the 2019 general election, with investors expecting increased investment in key areas such as agriculture and a slew of incentives for businesses. The government is widely expected to increase spending to ensure growth recaptures momentum. But most investors expect it to be prudent, as loosening fiscal deficit targets by too much would likely spark a sell-off in the bond market. The wish list is long, but the challenges are also too many. What choices the finance minister has? Will Budget 2018 be any different from previous budgets presented by Arun Jaitley? As Narendra Modi eyes 2019 general elections, Budget 2018 comes with many expectations. So our focus in the first segment is on the agriculture sector expectations. The government is keen to double the income of farmers by 2022, for which it has launched several new initiatives that encompass also activities from seed to marketing, as the economic survey has said. So starting the program, what expectations the agriculture sector has from Union Budget 2018. Joining me on the program at this stage is political analyst Shehzad Poonawala. Thanks very much, Shehzad, for joining us on the program. So what really are the key expectations as far as the agriculture sector is concerned?
You see, in this budget more than any other, given that it's the last full budget that this government will present, I think taking care of the expectations of the farmers will be a top priority. A lot of people have questioned whether the MSP promise and the recommendation of the Swaminathan report should be implemented. And let us not beat around the bush. Of all the sectors that growth has come back to normal levels after GST demonetization, we are going to in fact see 7.5% growth. We are seeing exports are rising. We are seeing that the EPF accounts demonstrate that there has been jobs also in the economy. But the agriculture sector is a little bit stressed, and there are indicators of it even if you take the analysis of electoral results. So I think the farmers will be expecting some kind of extension of the Bima Yojana, and they will be expecting some kind of subsidy on inputs, or at least MSP. But that is also something that can be done beyond the budget.
Okay, so Arun Jaitley, Finance Minister Arun Jaitley, all set to present the final full-fledged budget of this term of NDA to government, leaving the ministry at this stage, all set with his team, the big team, which has played a very, very key role in drafting, or in fact in preparing the first budget after the GST era. So this is going to be a very, very crucial budget. Shehzad, you mentioned that agriculture will of course be a very, very important priority for this budget, and in fact we have seen there have been several experts who have said that let's look at this sector from the workforce point of view. We are looking at 58% workforce which is being employed by this sector, but when you look at the contribution being made by the agriculture in GDP, there's a lot of scope. How do you look at the target of doubling farmers' income by 2022?
Well, I see that it is an ambitious project, and it is a project that needs to be achieved. Unfortunately, the economic survey has not painted a rosy picture, especially with the climate change and the chapter on that indicating how dependent farmers have become on vagaries of nature. So I think that there is a real need for the Kisan Bima Yojana, which is a wonderful scheme, to be extended and to ensure that all farmers come under its net. Secondly, there is a wonderful scheme in Madhya Pradesh, which is the Bhavantar scheme, where any difference between the farmer's selling price and the MSP is covered up by giving him that money directly into his account. Or there is an alternative view in Telangana, where they are giving the farmer per hectare some amount of money so he can subsidize his inputs. We need to do this for our farmers, because if we do not support our farmers, a large number of that section is then desperate to leave the farming sector and come into the urban areas, and then we are not able to provide them with
now we are also aware of MS Swaminathan committee recommendations related to this sector, and MS Swaminathan recommendations are, it says that there should be a fixed income for farmers. It has talked also about crop insurance. This particular government has also focused much on crop insurance schemes, also on micro irrigation, doubling farmers' income. But in terms of the allocation for agriculture sector, where do you think that successive governments have really failed? Because why is it that the Swaminathan committee recommendations and its findings say that a farmer's son is not really motivated to be in the agriculture sector? What has really led to the number of farmer suicides also?
I think this is a structural issue also. The fact that a large number of our farmers don't have the adequate land holding size.
Small land
so therefore technology can't be implemented. Let's be fair, the central government alone through one budget cannot solve the entire farm crisis that has plagued this country for 70 years. State governments are now getting more funds due to the GST allocations. They must do their bit. They must pick up the tab for the farmers. You cannot put every onus on the Modi government or the central government, whichever government it is. I think one more issue that we need to understand is that we need to have supplementary sources of income for farmers. And the Maharashtra government sorry, the Maharashtra state or Gujarat state with their very good cooperative movements have actually given a way forward for this country. I hope that can be extended throughout the course of this 1 year so that farmers can supplement their income through dairy and other means.
Now, food wastage and food storage, these are two areas which remain a big challenge when we talk about the agriculture sector. Also, you know, we have seen a sort of knee-jerk reaction from different political parties. We have seen state governments asking for loan waivers for farmers. Now, this sort of a knee-jerk reaction, because a sort of comprehensive approach which you are talking about is required when you talk about, you know, when you're calling it a structural issue that exists in the agriculture sector. What beyond these knee-jerk reactions? You know, there are several issues which need to be addressed, and can a budget really deal with that?
It's not fair to call it knee-jerk. See, every year corporates ask for big tax write-offs. That is not called knee-jerk. That is called subsidy. That is called giving impetus to growth. But if a farmer demands a loan waiver and the government gives it, then it is called a knee-jerk. I would be very skeptical about calling it that. But it is, yes, you're right, it is a permanent, it's not a permanent fix. It is a temporary solution. The long-term solution has to be how to make agriculture sustainable. And let's say the Prime Minister said double the income by 2020. Even if we can achieve a substantial portion of that, we will be doing a lot of justice to the farmers. They have been suffering for 70 years. It doesn't mean that if his income is 100, it should become 200, but even if it reaches 175 and he can sustain agriculture, and we can use these cooperative movements to give him an additional source of income, I think we would have achieved and done a lot of good for our farmers. So
you said adhocism, the whole approach towards agriculture sector must change. We have seen the sort of ad hoc steps which you know, several state governments have taken in form of loan waivers for the agriculture sector, the sort of comprehensive approach which is required. Joining me on the program now is also my colleague Parakram. Parakram, what inputs you have from the parliament premises?
बिल्कुल नताशा, देश का आम बजट आज लोकसभा में वित्त मंत्री अरुण जेटली पेश करेंगे। पूरे देश की नजर इस आम बजट पर है। ताज़ा जानकारी जो है अभी की हाल ही की वो ये कि ठीक 9 बजे वित्त मंत्री अरुण जेटली अपना ब्रीफकेस लेकर वित्त मंत्रालय से निकले हैं। 10:15 बजे संसद भवन परिसर में कैबिनेट की एक बैठक होनी है और उसके बाद ठीक 11 बजे लोकसभा की कार्यवाही की शुरुआत के साथ वित्त मंत्री अरुण जेटली आम बजट देश की जनता के सामने रखेंगे। कितना उम्मीदों पर खरा उतरेगा वित्त मंत्री का ये बजट, ये देखना होगा। नताशा,
right, so several expectations, and as Parakram just mentioned that at 11 the final budget of the Modi government of this term will be with everyone, and in fact major expectations will be revealed that if the finance minister has really lived up to everyone's really lived up to the expectations of everyone or not. Largely it is being perceived that this budget will be focusing heavily on the rural economy, on agriculture. Also one has to see what will happen to the tax slabs. But at this stage, time now for me to slip into a short break. Next, when we come back on the other side, let's focus on railways, on the infrastructure sector. The economic survey has said that major investment is required. So what will be done with the fiscal space? So does the finance minister really has that fiscal elbow room at this stage? We'll talk about that on the other side. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching our special on budget expectations. The economic survey 2017-18 says that Indian Railways has been losing out passengers to airlines in the last 5 years, as travel by air becomes more beneficial in every possible sense. According to the survey, railway passenger growth has dropped by an average of 0.26% in last 5 years, ending 2016-17, while the number of domestic air passengers has been increasing 10% every year. According to aviation industry's regulatory body, DGCA, narrowing gap between the fares of railways and airlines is one of the key reasons behind this. And so what one really must expect from the railways in this budget, also the larger issue of infrastructure sector. Economic survey has said there has to be major investment in the infrastructure sector when the government talks about ease of doing business. How far the investment and how will the investment come in? Also joining me in the program now, two esteemed panelists, P.K. Srivastav, he's former General Manager, South Central Railways. Thanks very much, Mr. Srivastav, for joining us on the program, and also BJP spokesperson Gopal Krishna Agarwal. Thanks very much, Mr. Agarwal, for joining us on the program. So starting with you, Mr. Agarwal, first, you were not there in the previous segment. It's largely being assumed that this particular budget will focus heavily on rural economy and agriculture. What's your take on that?
There has been a lot of debate on the agriculture distress, and people generally think there is a perception being made out is that the MSP is the only solution to the agriculture distress, which is not the reality. In reality, the focus should shift from merely growth in the agriculture sector on production based to income generation, and that will be one of the major focus of this budget, that the distress in the agriculture sector or farmers can be tackled with shifting focus from income generation, and there will be infrastructure development in the rural areas, alternative employment avenues for cottage industries, dairy farming, etc., so that their income is increased, creating warehousing facilities for larger storage. These are the various areas where farmers can be benefited more, and their distress can be tackled. Even insurance, there can be shifting from insurance from loss of crop to price fluctuation also. There is a talk of introducing the scheme of Bhavantar, where MSP price the farmers are allowed to sell in the open market and difference is paid to their account. So there are so many things where government want to shift the focus from income generation.
Now, in the President's address, the President talked about the eNAM project, in fact, the National Agriculture Market, and how remunerative prices for the produce of the farmers is actually been a big issue. But we have seen not very many states have really come forward in amending the APMC Act. How do you really look at the center-state equation on the issue of bringing in the mandis, because there's still a strong network of middlemen who are operating, and we have seen the gap between the retail and the farm gate prices. How your government thinks that will
actually government wanted to amend the APMC Act, because the major problem for the farmers to was that they were compulsorily they had to sell their produce in the local mandis because of this APMC Act, and APMC Act is in the domain of the state government, and the state government and local politics did not allow APMC Act to be amended. This government tried so many times with ordinance, other thing. Therefore, this eNAM initiative is to counter that APMC Act, and the central government is trying to create a national market. GST itself will help into the creation of the national market. Even eNAM initiative, there are around 5,000 mandis across the country. Last year, the target was to create e-mandis for 600 mandis. Now, further more mandis will be brought into this e-mandi initiative, where they can sell across the country. What happens is that the produce in the regional areas, if they cannot go to the different markets in different geographical areas, the farmers do not get a realized good price.
The fact this is also the final budget of NDA 2 as far as this term is concerned, there are many experts who feel, though we are not very sure, that if there is sufficient fiscal elbow room for the finance minister to declare a populist budget, will that also be high on priority?
No, as far as resources are, if you consider the resources, there are ample resources. There are so many schemes through which government can generate resources. One is the day before yesterday, there had been a signing with the ADB Bank for rural infrastructure creation. There has been a signing of deal with Japan for investment into bullet trains, and then there is a disinvestment mechanism through which government can generate resources. and with direct tax collection also increasing, I don't think there is a big constraint on the resources side for investment. The resource constraint is on populist schemes, resource constraint is on with regard to where it creates a deficit without creation of countervailing assets.
Much of the money was also coming from the commodity prices, low commodity prices, but now the commodity prices are also picking up, and this is really, this is one area where many feel that this can actually hit the fiscal space, and if the government will really be very strong on the fiscal consolidation roadmap or not. Mr. Srivastav, now railways is one area, and we have seen since last year the railway budget was merged with the union budget. At this stage, what really should be high priority for the finance minister when he presents when he presents the union budget, talking about the railways also?
See, the most important thing I feel today is that we have to gain back our passengers. We have to win back our freight, because these are the two factors which are very, very important. Freight is the bread and butter of the railways, and somehow if you consider the rail coefficient, it's literally going down. There are many factors, like for example, the road network is improving very well,
right?
And the various diesel prices going up and all that. So we have to be competitive with the road sector. Otherwise, our commodities will shift on to the road. So we have to win back our freight. We have to win back our passenger sector. If you analyze the passengers for that matter, those passengers who are between like 0 to 50 kilometers, if you see the entire analysis, there is a decline in 0 to 50 kilometers passengers, which is serious. Which is serious because these are the passengers who are from villages to villages. So that means our passenger sector has to do well, our passenger trains have to do well, where the people have to be taken, because long term in any case we are the masters, we have to carry this traffic, but at least these passengers we have to win back, and we have to see the fare also coming back to us, because normally if you compare our fare structure, passenger fare is tremendously less compared to the fare structure of the entire world, and that is because of the cross subsidy, whatever government policy has to be done, but we have to improve about this end-to-end timings.
And how about the operating ratio? It has improved, or
operating ratio has to improve very, very well. Any operating ratio between 95 to 96 etc. is not going to help. I was working on South Central Railway. We brought the operating ratio down as low as 76%. Now, operating ratio is like, how much you spend basically to earn how much. And unless you are in the range of somewhere around 80 or something, 80, 85, you are not left with any funds for development basically. If I have an operating ratio of 80, then I have 20 rupees, 20 paisa left for the development, which is not happening.
Now, the fact that you have tremendous experience in this area, you've been personally associated as a senior officer here in the South Central Railways, if one really has to trace the development of this sector, whenever we talk about railways, we talk about safety, we talk about security, also passenger amenities which are being provided. How it has really improved, or it has not improved at all? What has really changed? Because even today, if you go to any of these major stations, even in terms of, you have digital booking of tickets now, but in terms of number of trains, number of seats, for the common passenger, who's why is he choosing an airline instead of a train today? Because seats are still not available. What are the reasons behind that?
See, I will not say that, because the sector which we are catering to is a little the medium class passengers, and the lower class passengers in any case will remain with us. And as I mentioned about this sector of 0 to 50 kilometers, that has to be little looked into. But if you see in general, you mentioned about safety. Yes. When a person travels today and when he sees any accident in the recent past or something, he is little disturbed that am I taking a safe transport, and that is where we have to step in. The Rashtriya Sanraksha Kosh which has been generated out, good amount is there. But let me tell you very frankly, we have to be very focused as to what to do. These signaling things which are causing failures, or these rail fractures which are causing failures, we have to maybe take it strongly. Any human failure, we have to deal with them with the iron rod.
Okay.
And any this thing where where we are seeing that any
and
check.
how far suggestions like dynamic pricing works, for a passenger, who wants a cheap way of reaching home. If you want to book a ticket for tomorrow, things like dynamic pricing hasn't really worked in the past. But why is it that
if you see out of the total the passenger share, the dynamic pricing gives somewhere around 200 odd crores. It's not it's a very a peanut exercise.
Okay.
This is not going to really help, and it sometimes works counterproductive also. Because people feel, what is this? Yeah, I mean you are just taking me for a ride.
Before I take a short break, quickly your comment also on the larger issue of bullet trains, because now the government is also focusing on bullet trains. We have there's a possible there's a possibility that in this particular budget there can be announcements for an increased investment and allocation for the urban infrastructure. The economic survey has said India needs $4.5 trillion by 2040 to develop the infrastructure sector. What's your take on the bullet trains?
See, we have to give technical input to the railways. Frankly speaking, a bullet train, if I was a CEO, maybe it wouldn't have been my absolute first priority, because I have to cater to the general people.
Okay.
And in fact, today taking the trains in time, increasing the medium speed of these trains, etc., so that I can take them, at least reduce end-to-end timings by 1 or 2 hours, will instill a lot of confidence into the people.
Okay.
Bullet
so much
train
needs to
is
happen.
good.
Much needs to happen. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that it is good for a country to have ambitious projects on its menu list, while the narrative now under Mr. Goyal has come back to railway security, and it's not that 1 lakh crore is being diverted from railway security to the bullet train.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Agarwal.
That's what I wanted to tell, that the bullet train project in itself is a self-generating financing system, where the investment will come from in the form of FDI, and in itself it will create lot of economic activity. Ultimately, everybody is asking that the budget should give incentivized investment, bring more jobs, so that infrastructure is created. So investment itself acts as a catalyst to increase employment.
Okay, so you're saying it has a multiplier effect.
And the fund is outside the budget, so therefore it will not be a constraint on allocation.
Okay, so any project has a multiplier effect, and this is an ambitious project, and it must be there in the menu list. This is what the panelists here are saying. But of course, with bullet trains, it's also important to get the basics right. And when we are talking about the basic facilities in the railways, it's important that the focus of this budget should also be in these particular areas. Time now for me to slip into a short break. Next, when we come back on the other side, let's focus on the manufacturing and the service sector. The gap that exists between Big Make in India initiative and the share of the service sector in the GDP. Time now for me to slip into a short break. Welcome back. You're watching our special on budget expectations. Finance Minister Arun Jaitley will present his 5th budget in the House today. This will be Prime Minister Narendra Modi's last full annual statement of revenue and expenditure before 2019 Lok Sabha elections. Expectations from various sectors are soaring high, and everyone has some wish to make to the Finance Minister. There are several questions doing the rounds, like will Budget 2018 increase personal income tax slab? How much relief corporates expect from the Budget 2018? Will Budget 2018 also have some announcement related to the 7th Pay Commission? The first post-GST rollout budget is expected to boost economic growth, giving an impetus to private investment. So what about the macroeconomic fundamentals, and most importantly, the crucial sectors like the manufacturing and the service sector? And joining me on the program now is also a senior journalist, Sanjay Thapa. Thanks very much, Mr. Thapa, for joining us on the program. And also joining on the program is co-chairman ASSOCHAM Arun Jain. Thanks very much, Mr. Jain, for joining us on the show. So my question to you, Mr. Jain, major expectations as far as the macroeconomic fundamentals are concerned. Any more investment requires that you'll have to do away with your fiscal deficit targets. What really are you expecting?
See, so far as the corporates are concerned, corporates are almost full of the bag as such, right from the MAT reduction or totally going away from the MAT to export incentives this time. And on the top of it, for the employment generation, we have to look seriously for the real estate support also in the budget somehow regarding the GST rates specifically to be mentioned over here. Right. Apart from it, we are also expecting that the finance minister will look down to the income tax rates for the corporates very seriously this year, because all over the world the income tax rates are going down. So we are expecting that the income tax rates for the corporates will also be slashed this year, okay, in line with the world going down towards that way. So far as the other corporate expectations are concerned, we are expecting that the Government of India will be seriously looking down to the capital incentives for generating the capital expenditure on the private side, because the private capital expenditure is very slow in the last few years. So we are expecting that for the capital expenditure, the Government of India will give some boost, like okay, ATI in the section income tax act. Earlier we had the provision for.
Is a cut in corporate tax likely? In 2015-16 budget speech, the finance minister had proposed reducing the rate of corporate tax from 30% to 25% over a 4-year period. So are you expecting that this announcement can be made?
See, that was partly fulfilled because below the 50 lakh income, that was already done in the last budget to 25%. We are expecting for the other corporates over and above the 5 million income, this to be implemented this year as such. That is the major expectation from our side.
Okay, now manufacturing and service. Now these are two areas where we have seen that the share of GDP is way higher of the service sector and not really comparable of the manufacturing sector, still contributes to 17 to 18%, whereas the target by 2025 is of 25% of GDP. If we compare ourselves with other countries like Korea and China, they are way ahead. Make in India has been one initiative of this government, but there are several challenges. We have seen it has not really picked up the way the government would have wanted it to. Now, at this stage, what do you think? Will there be any more announcements for the manufacturing sector?
Yeah, definitely, because Make in India is our Honorable Prime Minister's favorite program and right program as such. And we expect that the labour and the land reforms will be given the focus in the coming sessions of the parliament. And in this particular budget, we are expecting that the labour reforms will be the focus area as such, not simply by making 39 acts into the one act, Welfare Act for the workers, but other acts or other provisions also will be coming into this.
Okay. Now, it is going to be a very, very balancing act by the finance minister, tough balancing act. Let's not forget, many are saying there is a strong possibility of finance minister declaring a populist budget. Let's hear from Mr. Thapa. Mr. Thapa, as a political analyst, what really is your understanding? Will the budget take care and realize the fact that there are assembly elections in 8 crucial states? What really will be high on agenda? Budget generally, we call it an economic document, but actually is a political document.
Exactly. I feel that this budget is going to be a little populist in the sense that there might be some giveaways in terms of IC personal income tax. And besides that, there will be emphasis on farm and also farm sector and also employment generation. And besides that, I feel that the finance minister has a very tight rope to walk, given the fiscal deficit slippage, which is bound to be closer to 3.5 instead of 3.2, the target that was set last year. So, given this fiscal tightening, I don't think there is much room for that, but given this last budget for the Modi government, full budget for the Modi government, there will be some kind of giveaways for the Aam Aadmi in terms of, let's say, income tax. I believe the income tax threshold limit will be raised to a certain extent, and there might be some tinkering with the ATC, ATD, so that there is some kind of
so possible SOPs to placate rural voters. We have seen a sovereign rating upgrade for the country and the economic situation of India. But let's not forget this large budget deficit also. So the sort of fiscal space which fiscal tightening you have talked about, what sort of steps in terms of placating the rural voters this budget might take?
I believe the Manrega would again get a little higher allocation this time, and also there will be some kind of incentive I expect from the finance minister on the job creation sector, and a little push to the startups which have been slightly slowed down There is a little push on the startup sector in terms of some incentives coming there, and some kind of boost to the youth sector, which Prime Minister has been saying for job creation. That will be some of the highlights of the budget this time.
Right. So, in fact, in several budgets, we've talked about the demographic dividends. So, greater investment also possibly in the social sector. But
yes, social sector and would get a major, because last budget health got a little bad treatment.
Okay.
A little stepmotherly treatment. This time I believe social sector will get a little higher allocation.
Okay, social sector will get a higher allocation. Mr. Agarwal, social infrastructure is equally important, and it's very well reflected in this year's economic survey also, when CEA has categorically talked about agriculture, gender inequality, climate change. So largely a very interdisciplinary approach, and you'll have to move forward in different areas to achieve a set target. You know, it can't really be in silos that you achieve one target and forget the other. Do you think social infrastructure, social sector will also be high in priority for the government?
Definitely, whatever infrastructure investment the government creates, that is an important social investment that the government does with regard to roads, with regard to warehousing, with regard to power, village electrification, power to every individual household, then low cost housing to every 5 crore people. These are important issues, and Prime Minister has very categorically clarified that this budget will never be with regard to only vote catching. This will not be a populist in the sense which people consider it to be, and many people think that the budget is only on the tax rate. Actually, the budget is a larger document, economic survey, budget, what the Prime Minister's aim and target is. These are all together will decide what the economy will grow. Okay. And therefore, it is not, one thing is important, that in the budget you just allocate the available resources into various segments, but you give a policy statement. Okay. In that, I think the important issue is infrastructure investment will continue to create better standard of living. Education is an area of concern where more allocation is required. Health is another area which improves the quality of living of individual. Then skill development, development of clusters for MSMEs, developing clusters in rural areas for alternative employment opportunity for the villagers. All these will be the bigger focus area in the budget, and there merely tinkering of tax rates, etc. is not thing. One thing I would also like to tell you, when the finance minister said that the corporate tax will be reduced, at the same time he said that it will be revenue neutral because we will withdraw many of the incentives. This distorts the tax administration and creates a lot of litigation, which CA also, Chief Economic Advisor, has also mentioned that a lot of litigations are on the side of the government, and which are wasteful energy. It is counter to ease of doing business. So these are the focus areas which will create ease of doing business, create an economic environment.
Okay. Now you mentioned ease of doing business, and land and labor are very crucial to it. From that perspective, when we talk about the Make in India program, what it takes to help India emerge as a production hub. We have not really reached that level. The target of 25% of share of manufacturing in the GDP by 2025, is it really possible?
Definitely, because what happened is, when we got independence, large population was dependent on agriculture. And as the economy grows, people shift from agriculture to manufacturing, then to services. Right. We had seen a growth in services, which leads to concentration of wealth. There is no much distribution of employment and other things. Okay. So population which shifted from agriculture should have been absorbed into manufacturing sector. There should have been more major focus since independence on the manufacturing sector, and that too in MSME. Internationally, you see that 60–70% of the growth in the manufacturing sector comes from MSME. We don't have that much developed MSME sector because of informal sector, because of informal economy, GST, demonetization, etc., have helped them bring the MSME sector to the
Shehzad
formal
wants to
sectors.
Shehzad wants to respond to that. Shehzad, you've heard several things. Mr. Agarwal has talked about skilling, about manufacturing, about investment, about how education and health there has to be a greater investment in these areas. What's your overall assessment at this stage? Because when we talk about manufacturing, the first thing that comes to our mind is, of course, what about the land and labor issues? What about people and the employability factor? Because many of the graduates who are coming out of many of these technical institutes, the companies are saying we can't hire them because they don't really have the required skills.
You see, I am a very big skeptic of government spending more on now infrastructure by itself, simply because you also have to see the crowding out effect that may take place. So I think the government should now focus not on spending itself. It has to do the requisite spending in infrastructure, but it must now encourage private sector investment in these areas of infrastructure, so that that can also spur growth and jobs. Secondly, I have an objection with the term populist. India is a democracy. If you cater to 85–90% of the people by making increased allocations in social welfare, I think it is popular, not populist. So I would say that the terminology should be changed. It should not be called a populist budget. In fact, I think you should see what is happening in the health sector. 82% of our health sector is in private hands, and the increased spending on that, in fact 30% people go bankrupt when there is a critical care spending they have to do in healthcare. So I would request the Honorable Finance Minister, if he is watching, that there must be increased allocations in the health sector. That is a very important area and it must not be neglected. And similarly in education, there must be a tremendous amount of increased allocation. Notwithstanding the fact that states are also getting more share now under the GST regime and they've been allocated more funds, they must also spend. But I would request the government to concentrate on agriculture, health and education.
Health and education, because access, affordability and quality is a main challenge in the health sector. And as Shehzad Poonawalla also mentioned, out-of-pocket expenditure is a crucial issue. Will the health funding, health allocations go up in this budget? We'll have to wait and see. Coming back to you, Mr. Srivastav, urban infrastructure. And you were talking about, you heard Mr. Agarwal talking about the bullet trains. What's your overall understanding of the urban infrastructure, from roads, from railways, the airlines, shipping? How do you really look at the larger transportation issue which has to be addressed? Because when we are looking at ease of doing business, we need to really get our network right.
See, if you look at the urban infrastructure, basically, port connectivity for that matter, if you mentioned about shipping. I had a wonderful experience on Krishnapatnam port, the last mile connectivity, if you give in time and if you are able to concentrate on these patches here and there, you can really improve. Like from 9 rigs, we went to 20 rigs per day. So these are the things which have to be very quickly looked into.
Okay.
And especially, once you are talking of the urban infrastructure, the concept has to change. Now, shortly we are going to have train sets in the country. It relates to the manufacturing and service infrastructure also. You add train sets, you again reduce end-to-end timings, and now train sets are going to be manufactured in the country, right, which used to be a thought of, as if we have to import everything from abroad. Coaches are being built here, the locomotives are being built here. Although there is a lot of shortage of coaches and wagons, if you permit me to say that, because but still for the urban infrastructure, if we have to add our rolling stock assets, etc., we can really go miles as far as the transportation is concerned.
Quickly your word on infrastructure before I wind up the show. Yes.
See, so far as the infrastructure is concerned, last year we have seen the capital expenditure of nearly 25 lakhs in the budget as such, which was increased 14.1%. And we are expecting that this year the expenditure is going to be around 27 lakh crore rupees plus as such, because the capital expenditure by the government have to be kicked out so that the other private sector infrastructure also boom up. And especially keeping in view the infrastructure requirement as per the CEA in the economic survey of $4.5 trillion, and there is a gap of $629 billion already over there. So I think that this budget is going to kickstart the infrastructure in a big way, especially in the road and highways as such, because the target which Mr. Gadkari have taken this year of increasing the length of the roads of more than 1 lakh kilometers in total, Gram Panchayat and highways put together as such, is quite optimistic.
Okay, so you're saying a lot of push can be given to the infrastructure sector, to the social infrastructure, and also most importantly in terms of the rural economy. We'll be right back after a short break. Thanks very much all of you for joining us in this particular segment. Stay tuned.